Society. You all know me, I'm Linda Scarcella. You all know the museum is at 4613 Laurel Road, and if you are interested in a tour, visit our website, and we can make some arrangements for that. Tonight we have the pleasure of having Pat Nichols here. She is with the Parma Historical Society. She is going to share the early history of Parma. Their homestead is at 6975 Road in Parma, Ohio. Pat has been a volunteer there for 5 years. She lived in Parma since 1989. She is married with 4 children. Studied history at Baldwin Wallace University. She enjoyed participating in World War II reenactment, and she enjoys traveling with her daughter, reading, gardening, and photography. She is from rural Wood County, and so the farm is like home to her. So I'm going to turn this over to her right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Really nice. I think our early paths are probably pretty similar from what I can research. So some of this you probably already know. You know that we are part of the area known as the Connecticut Western Reserve. 120 miles wide, was approximately 3 million acres, bought by the Connecticut Land Company for $1.2 million back in the 1700s. Moses Cleveland was actually the surveyor that was hired to come here and survey the land into 5 mile square sections to be sold. In 1806, the area known as Township 6, Range 13 was measured out in a square by Abraham Tappan, member of the survey party, and that was going to be Parma. Parma was originally known as Greenbrier for a particularly thorny, obnoxious bush that it seemed to everybody had to chop down to get to anywhere. So we were known as Greenbrier until 1816. So when our settlers began moving in, they are mostly New Englanders. They came by one of 4 trails. One most popular with, I think, most people that came here was called the Lake Trail. It started on the Hudson River in New York. You came overland to the Buffalo area. You could either then continue to come overland, or you could get on a ship on the lake and come in through the Cuyahoga River. Roads were very non-existent or very rough. Most people used oxen to pull their wagons. Most people walked, not riding. The wagons were loaded with their belongings and their supplies. It never fails to amaze me that someone would leave everything, your home, your families, your churches, your social life, the comforts, to walk 1,000 miles to nothing but woods and carve out another life for yourself. I don't think I would have that in me to do that. I don't think so. Because this was heavy forest at the time. There was no one here but Native Americans. So it was literally starting all over again, which in my opinion takes a huge amount of guts to do that. So we are known as Township 6, Range 13. Originally it was sold to 5 landowners, and it goes by, we talk about people buying in either the Blake tract, the Cheney tract, the Eli tract, the Tuckerman tract, or the Plimpton tract. They had the big sections, and then they sold out the land to other people. So Stearns Homestead is in the Eli tract. Our first settler was I never know how to pronounce this, Benehay Fay. He is a native of Massachusetts, came to Parma with his wife Ruth and their 10 children, located in what was known as the Blake tract, which is the corner of Ridge and Pearl. There's a historical marker there currently. He was not a farmer, but a businessman, and soon realized that Pearl Road was a very popular travel path. So he built an inn and a tavern, and it did quite well for himself. So that road turned into a stage road between Cleveland and Columbus. So he was situated pretty well. He also built the first brick building in Parma in 1826, his first a home for his family. He lived to be 85 years old. Our next settler was in 1817. His name was Conrad Countryman. I love these guys' names. He was known as the Mohawk Dutchman because he was from the Mohawk Valley of New York. Came here with his 3 sons and his younger brother, and he came prepared with tools, saws, hammers, chisels, an anvil, tools for ironwork. And it wasn't long before he opened up a blacksmith shop and a sawmill, and in no time at all had plenty of work repairing wagons and shoeing horses. So he was pretty well set. He's actually the first settler of Parma Heights. Wow. Parma Heights separated from us in 1911, but where he was located, he would have been the first settler of Parma Heights. The next major settler was a young man who traveled on foot from Connecticut to the Western Reserve. His name was Palatia Bliss. Was said to have arrived with a pack on his shoulders, an axe in his hand, and a promise in his heart. So he came 50 acres, built a shelter, then went back to Connecticut, married his sweetheart, and they came back to Parma. So that was the promise in his heart, was his sweetheart. So yeah. By 1818, only 4 families called Township 6 home, and so it was very slow until about 1821. There was a group of 5, I think. They were neighbors in Maine, and they came west together, settled in southern Ohio. For whatever reason, they really were not happy there, decided to go back to Maine. So they came north to up here to reach the Cleveland-Columbus Road. First, it was getting close to winter. Decided it was really not a good idea to keep traveling. So they put down roots in Parma, and they ended up staying. They settled along York Road. The Norton brothers were from Vermont. They bought adjoining farms along the Independence Parma Township Line Road, which is Broadview Road. For several years, they were the only families on the east side of Parma. And this I didn't realize until I started researching this talk. There is a gorge that houses Quarry Creek that currently runs under Snow Road. If you're going down Snow Road towards Midtown, you're crossing a bridge. That's the gorge. That separated East and West Parma for a long time because they had no means to get across it. And I'm assuming it was a lot deeper then than it is now, because I went, what? But yeah, so that separated them all because they didn't have anyone to get across it. So we had East Parma and West Parma, which I always learn something new when I'm doing this. So yeah. When we had about 20 households, they started talking about setting up some sort of self-government. So on March 7th in 1826, they passed a resolution creating a township by the name of Parma. So in 2026, that township will be 200 years. There's also several theories on how Parma got its name, and I have to explain to people, I'm assuming you understand all the time, that there's lots of stories passed down, but as the resident historian, I can't prove them. So I have to say that they're stories that we've heard, because I can't prove one way or another. So the 2 most common stories of how Parma was named was one after Parma, New York, which wouldn't be too far off the mark. There's quite a fascination with classical Italy in the early 19th century, and our New England transplants, if you know, brought with them names of their towns, the way they laid out a town, the architecture, all that along with them, so naming Parma after Parma, New York wouldn't be too far-fetched. The other common one is that we had a doctor named David Long that traveled to Italy, claimed the area reminded him of Parma, Italy, and that's the other story. So that's the 2 stories of how Parma was named Parma. So, but I can't prove either one. So after we were a township, the first school district was formed soon after, served to children of 10 families. First schoolhouse was a log structure located on the northern corner of what is now Parma Heights Cemetery. By 1870, Parma had grown enough to warrant 9 school districts and served 300 families. So each school district had its own 1-room log cabin where township children learned reading, writing, and basic arithmetic. School life was generally up to the 8th grade. Many children lived miles from their school, either walking or being driven in a wagon, and the school buildings would also serve as social hubs for dances or even church services, community get-togethers. In the years following, we started settling into a town. Roads got laid out. One of my photos up here is the Henniger house. This is our oldest house still standing in Parma. That was Philip and Sophia Henniger. They were married in 1841. He bought land and built a log cabin on Broadview Road, what was called Town Line Road. It is the highest point in Parma, and you can see, when you're on a clear day, you see all the way down to downtown. The view is insane, yes. It is built out of sandstone. He had a quarry in the Rockside area, so that's the sandstone that he built his house out of. The house is still standing, the barn is still standing. I believe it is currently owned by the city of Parma and managed by the West Creek Conservancy. Not really much has been done with it, but it's still standing, so there's that. Around the same time, a young man from Walpole, New Hampshire arrived. His name was Lyman Stearns. He married Rhoda Ann Graves on September 8th of 1834, and they came on their wedding trip to Copley, Ohio to visit his brother. Stayed through the winter and returned in the spring, but he liked the area. So they returned. He bought the 48.5-acre parcel known as Stearns Homestead currently. We still have his farmhouse still standing from 1855. It has been not remodeled, but it has had some interior work done. And then last year, before, the city said we couldn't let people in it because the floor was sinking. So I got a historical architectural guy to come out, which he was having a great time. We just had to stabilize the beam. These beams are massive, and you can still see the hand-hewn marks in the beams. So we just had to stabilize the beam. We raised the floor 4 inches, and so that house is good to go. So I have that house open, so when we're open to the public, they can go in and see a taste of life in the 1850s, as well as our other house. So the house is built in what we call the Greek Revival style. That was very popular prior to the Civil War. It's very simple lines, symmetry, a gently sloping roof with covered porch. The home was made of wood with plaster walls and wood plank floors. He renovated it in the 1980s. The furnishings and the items in the house are to the time period, donated through the years by other members of Parma families. Let's see. One thing I always think is fun. So I said, like, Broadview Road is known as Town Line Road, and then Independence Road because it separated Parma and Independence. Ridge Road was called Center Road because it ran down the center of town. Very simple. Yeah. Ridge Road was called Bean Road for the farms that were along its edges, and then it was renamed Ridge Road by H.A. Stahl, the developer who set up the housing development around it, and the Ridgewood Golf Course in the 20s. York Road got its name from a group of settlers who came to Ohio from New York, settled alongside that road. Snow Road is named for the Clifford Snow family, who farmed where state and snow roads intersect, which is pretty much where I live. There were no roads at the time, just a cow path, where Mr. Snow would walk his cattle down to what is now West 54th Street. So Snow Road used to be just a cow path where the cattle would walk down. That's all. State Road was a private plank road until 1831. And do you know what I mean by plank road? Okay. Way back, they were just dirt, and mud was a huge issue. So they would make wooden planks and lay them down so you drove over the wooden planks. Hopefully they didn't sink into the mud too far. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I think some of our roads are bad now. Yeah. Pearl Road had a lot of names. Beginning with the Cleveland Columbus Road, they called it the Worcester Pike, and it was also the Parma Plank Road. There was also a time where township officials laid blocks of limestone down Ridge Road, and they basically dissolved into the mud. So they decided that wasn't a very good idea. So a lot of the roads around ended up to be toll roads that way because it took so much effort to have any kind of decent road that this paid for that. Yeah. I also like to tell people we have a variety of historical markers in Parma. Stearns Homestead has a historical marker. The Henniger House has a historical marker. Parma's birthplace on the corner of Ridge and Pearl Road, there's a marker there. The first high school, which was located by Byers Field, there's a marker acknowledging that. The German Central Organization on New York Road has a marker. They were created in 1926 as a recreational place for the German American community in Parma. I'm not sure about Brunswick, but I know with Parma, after our New England settlers and residents, then you see other ethnicities come through. We are very heavily Eastern European, always have been. German, Hungarian, we have one of the largest Ukrainian populations, Polish, that area is very heavily settled that way. Old York Road in Parma Heights, when it intersects with Parma, has a marker. It is the first brick rural road in the United States. Construction of 4 miles of brick road began in 1893 and was completed in 1896. We also have Crowell Hospital on the campus of Tri-C, which was built to serve wounded soldiers and German POWs. That was dedicated in 1944. Closed in 1964, moved to University Circle, and is now the Stokes VA Hospital. We have 4, I believe, historical cemeteries. St. Peter's Cemetery, York Street Cemetery, Parma Heights, and then there's an early settler cemetery that just has just a few graves in it. I'm still trying to find somebody in the city that will tell me who's taking care of that. Haven't got that far yet. But the Historical Society, I've been there about 5 years. My focus is the 2 houses. The second house was built in 1919. That was the Gibbs family. And when they passed in the 70s, Parma very wisely stepped up and bought the 48 1/3 acres. With some help from, there was a Soil and Water Conservancy, like the National, that kind of money. It is meant to be an open space. It's free to the public. We are not allowed to charge admission. It is to be access for everybody. So it's remained an open space for us. So I handle the 2 houses and the collections within. Has not really been the focus of the institution, more the farm has been their focus. So we've been trying to get things into correct archival containers, make sure we have records. And there's always a surprise when I open a box. So I think I opened one, found a World War I uniform, and had to call her, almost had a heart attack. So, those kind of things. So it's pretty cool to see what you can find. But the Historical Society is the managing organization of the farm. The Historical Society was organized in May of 1972. Has been going strong ever since. We have the 2 houses, like I said. Also the Yankee Barn, which predates the Stearns house. We think the barn is about 1848. We have the country store and several outbuildings. We currently have about 100 animals. Everything from chickens and ducks to a variety of our little horse herd going. Last year we added a couple of steers. We have a couple alpacas, and everything in between. Both homes are decorated to their time periods with furnishings donated over the years. Items in the Stearns house show how our pioneer settlers lived. I have displays with spinning wheels, yarn winders, early sewing machines, stereoscope. There's pump organs in both houses. And then the kitchen area would be the primitive ways that you would live in that time period. The Gibbs house is more to the 1940s, 1950s time period, decorated that way, but I like the kids when they come in the kitchen, like, does this look like your house at home? Like, there's a very old GE refrigerator that I don't even think my freezer would fit in, and that kind of stuff, and a stove, big gas stove with no thermostat, and I have the Victrola, the candlestick phone, the typewriter, all the stuff that, some of them surprise me, and they actually know things, and others I'm completely oblivious, but yeah. We occasionally put special displays out. I have mannequins out with to display different kinds of clothing. We oversee the day-to-day care and maintenance of our buildings, grounds, the animals, and the collection of items related to the history of Parma. Our goal is to bring together people interested in the history of Parma to perpetuate the memory of our early settlers, to collect and preserve historical information, to educate using accurate information, and to preserve and maintain Stearns as a working farm in a green space. We are an all-volunteer staff. We are also home to the largest 4-H club in Cuyahoga County. The Homestead Hoofers experience hands-on animal care, learning about health, nutrition, grooming needs of their animals. They learn what to look for if they have health issues, the things that we need to address. They learn the dedication and responsibility needed to care for their animals, and they learn about career opportunities in the agricultural fields. If you visit during the summer months, you will see them around the farm, maybe carrying a rabbit, walking a goat, helping with the pony rides. They're a very, very important part of our homestead. We offer a variety of special events throughout the year, from our fall festival to Art on the Farm to World War II on the homestead. Both homes are available for guided tours. Sometimes we have a large garden, so we sell produce, eggs, honey. So if you have a business, please come on up and say hello. I have our current brochure for this year. I have a variety of things up here when you're finished if you'd like to look at that showcase our history a little bit. And any questions?
We have some Gibbs family in Brunswick. I'm just wondering if there's any relation.
There is family still in the area because they were out to the farm last year. Yeah. So, yeah.
Do you have a staff for the